and then there's the Abels of the world, and Skrillex is another one, that person I work with, jcole, where they're so clear on and tapped into their creativity, and they don't waste their time listening to a bunch of other voices because they trust themselves. I worked with Kanye for a while, and things change when people have like mood disorders and different things that can affect addiction. All kinds of things can kind of change our general disposition. But like Kanye, you even watch it when you watch the documentary that was made on him. He was so tied into his own passion and what he believed to be true, and was like so excited to share it with the world. And he didn't give a shit what people thought.
All right, welcome everybody to a very special episode of Connection is Magic. This week's guest, Kathryn Frazier. Thank you so much for coming.
I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you. There's so much, to sound super LA, there's so much energy that's in alignment here, I feel like, because you've been around the music business a really long time, and you're also a life coach, right? And you help support artists and their mental health and their well-being. And so, yeah, and you've done some really cool shit. And you're also from Michigan, I believe, which is my home state.
Yes, I'm a Michigander.
And you also do TM. Do we get all the boxes checked? There's a lot of similar energy. So
there's probably more. By the conversation, there might be more boxes.
That's right. Everybody stay buckled in. Sometimes like the most simplest thing, right, can make such a huge impact in our lives. Like, I just want to start there because people might feel lost or, I don't know, like down, and sometimes it could be like a little tweak or two and you could literally be experiencing like a whole different life,
I love that you started on that, so thanks for being intuitive to even tap into that. Basically, it's a few small things that change our lives completely. I literally just got off a coaching session with someone who's in the music industry and experiencing a lot of stress and anxiety and just general unhappiness. And I very passionately, urgently asked her to do two things that I knew would probably shave off about 80% of the problem. You have to move your body every day, not a couple days a week. Like every day.
Absolutely.
And if you could really go for it. If you set your timer, walked out of your house, and I'm like, I'm going to walk, preferably as fast as you can, for 30 minutes. And when the timer goes off, I turn around and I walk right back. Your whole life would be different, because this person has a lot of anxiety and a lot of anxious and a lot of physical. She describes a lot of physical feelings of rushes and heat. And so there's a lot of biochemistry happening. Those two acts alone could change the whole path of everything for her. Water. I had a rapper that was making his album at my house in Chicago, a pretty well-known independent rapper, years ago. And I noticed that he just always seemed like he didn't feel good. Like he was always kind of rubbing his face. And I, because he was living with us, I noticed that he would wake up and he would drink like juices. And then he would sort of go into like Red Bull territory or like Coke. And then in the evening drink alcohol and smoke weed a lot. And as lots of young people in the world do now.
Breakfast of champions for a lot of rappers out there, I'd say sometimes, yeah.
But the reason I bring that up is because it's all dehydrating stuff, and then caffeine. So you're cranking yourself with either smoke or caffeine, but then there's no hydration. And I was like, you're made of water, and I haven't seen you put any water in yourself in days. Like I'm not sure how you're functioning. And so I was like, start drinking. Especially, he plays a lot of shows and stuff. I was like, just a bottle of water is 8 ounces. Try to do like 10 of those a day. And he was like, that seemed like insane. So it's like a glass of water. So if you drink one when you wake up, and then basically every hour and a half or 2 hours, drink a glass of water. Like you can just slam one. Like, tell me how you feel. Yeah. So he hit me up. He was then on tour and he was like, Kat, this water thing is crazy. Like, I feel great. Like, I feel different. You look different. I mean, I think a lot of people have seen that, the challenge of that woman who just drank water, for a certain amount of time, and her whole face looked like everyone thought she got a facelift.
It could literally look like a facelift or something. Yeah, I
Yeah.
remember you saying that. Yeah.
I'm
It's
old, so
wild.
I have to drink a lot of water because I'm already in that like getting dried up zone, but it's the key to life.
So one of the things you did earlier in life was you bought a crack house with a government loan or something, right? Is that close there? Can you tell us about that? And what did you learn from that experience? Because that was an example of stepping out of your comfort zone, which I've also heard you share could be really powerful to do.
I bought a house. It wasn't on the It wasn't on the market as a crack house or anything. It was. I bought a house that was abandoned, and when you buy a house that's owned by a bank, they have these big metal doors that they put on, like they seal off the building over the windows and the doors. And when you buy it, and I don't think I really realized this when I had never bought a house and I had no idea what I was doing, and I actually didn't really have any money. I asked a client if I could borrow $3,000, and back then I made like no money, and I was like, I'll work for you for the whole year if you give me this. And all I had to put down was $3,888 for this government FHA loan that you're allowed to do like once in your life. And they take, as soon as you close, they take all the doors and windows off, so all of a sudden the building's just like open. There's no door, like the doors didn't work, they didn't lock. And so I'm there by myself, in a pretty heavy neighborhood in Chicago, near where I lived. And I went up there alone. I mean, this is stupid. I would not recommend someone do this. And there were a lot of people very addicted, to drugs living in there. Like,
you saw people in there, Kathryn? You saw people living in there?
Through the side, there was a window grate that was loose, so people were coming in through a basement and just living there. And I'm like this young woman who has no clue what she's doing, and she's like, oh shit, what do I do? All these people are in here. I realized that they didn't even have electricity in the house. Usually a house, you rehab it, you don't have to do things like put electricity in it, so long story short, long story long, it was way more than what I could handle, I thought, but you have to handle it. So I didn't have the internet back then. So I bought a book at Home Depot and I read it. It was yellow and it was like homeowner's guide to whatever and rehabbing. And I just taught myself how to hang drywall, taught myself how to pour cement, taught myself how to tile. And it was all from this book. And so many mistakes. Like I still recently had to get new windows. This was like,
first of all, if this wasn't already inspiring enough, I just want to reiterate that there was no internet, really.
No internet.
Like, you know what I'm trying to say? Because there's internet now where you could YouTube University exists, Kathryn. Yeah. So people, but like they still want to do something that's old. Yeah.
There was internet like that we emailed and stuff, but it wasn't like now where you like Google and YouTube and some guy shows you how to do it, so even recently I had to replace all the windows, but I back then had boxed them all in with wood, trying to make it look cool, cutting wood and creating these. But the guy who just did my windows was like, who the hell put these windows in? They boxed in every single window in the house. So we have to pull out huge, it's like, there's been a lot of, one time there was a small room that I wanted to make into a giant shower. So I poured cement and I tiled it. And a few days later, it fell into the basement. Like it had no support and it just fell into the basement. It's like, so there's a lot of serious.
Hey guys, just want to take a minute and say thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you're appreciating the content and that you are being uplifted and inspired. Please hit the subscribe button if you've not done so already. We've got so many more cool guests, powerful interviews, just raw truth being shared to uplift and inspire humanity. If you have not done so already, please follow the podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. It means the world to us as we continue to grow this channel and this platform to continue to spread positivity in a world that really is hurting right now. Thank you so much for your support. It means the world. God bless. So this is what And this is no like so to go like to go from the micro to the macro, like this is what prevents people from taking these leaps in life, whatever the leap is, right? When it's the unknown, they don't want to have the equivalent of the tile falling into the basement moment, right? With whatever it is they're gonna do. How do you get people off that ledge, Kathryn?
I think you just need to remember that the leaps, even if it's a leap and it's a fail, unless you get like actually killed and taken out of the game, you know, um, they're always going to pass. Like when that shower fell into the basement and I have like $40 in the bank and I'm like looking at like how in the hell am I going to fix this now? Like, at that moment I'm like, everything is awful and how am I ever going to get past this? But it always passes. Always. Everything passes. Even really intense, terrible things pass. There's half empty and there's half full people. I've always been half full, and so was my mom, even though we always had a lot of stuff happening that was very trying. It was always like the half full. It's like, okay, well, that's terrible, let's figure it out, it'll pass, let's just figure, there's just no option to like shut down or just not deal with it. You just have to, and it goes away, and then you're like, oh, I'm going to remember that it went away, it's fine.
what makes a lot of what makes for a lot of really incredible artists is they have some type of deep trauma, typically like Amy Winehouse, just reference because that's on the extreme end. I think Mac Miller, incredibly gifted, incredibly talented, had some dark energy too. What makes them great, that art great, it's coming from this, you know what I'm trying to say? It's like using that darkness, it's
Sure.
tapping into the darkness, Kathryn, right? Like you have to put your foot into that darkness in order to like bring it back out to the world. Does that make sense? So that becomes a very fine line. So how do you, I don't know, propose artists, creative people can like tap into that and like do it in a, I don't know, in a way that's safer or like more sustainable? Better
Well, I
word.
think most people tap into emotion very strongly when it's painful because it forces them to, so they're feeling their feelings, their feels, and when things feel peaceful, they're a little more detached from like real feeling or rawness in that way. So musically, a lot of artists tap into the pain, share it, and because other human beings experience that pain, they feel heard, and therefore the connection, the synapses all start to connect, and that is why they are the fan base is connecting, and people are talking about how raw and honest and truthful you are, and it's simply because they're able to tap into the human experience and share it.
And have the courage to share it though, Kathryn, because I think a lot of people in everyday life, when they're feeling that way, they tend to isolate and they tend to go in a corner or within. So now here's somebody coming out in the open, right? That's a big part of it too, I think. Yeah.
Well, the courage, and also it's the outlet. A lot of artists, and I know hundreds of them, who can really tap into that pain and share it with the world. If you speak to them about it, they aren't sharing it. That is the one way it comes out.
Oh, interesting. So in a private conversation, like they don't really like going there, but they'll go there in their art. Right, right, right.
And we pay attention to the struggling, hard, artists. There's also a lot of artists who are super well adjusted and very happy
Yeah.
and peaceful and are huge artists that are doing really well. Like one of the truest songs that ever could have been made was probably like Bobby McFerrin's "Don't Worry, Be Happy."
That's not put up there like in Nirvana's Nevermind, right? Is more talked about and celebrated in some ways. Like is like, oh, this is this iconic piece of art, but
We as viewers are drawn to the passion. Like Sinead O'Connor in her film about her life, she's talking about, my favorite song by her is the song Troy, and it's unbelievably powerful. And if you watch it, she is screaming, and it's guttural and it's sweet and it's just like, you know, and the whole song is about how her mother used to leave her in a garden and wouldn't let her in the house, and she had to sleep alone as a little girl outside, and her mom
wow.
would turn the light off and she would just be stuck all night. She was abused. When you're performing and really up in being an artist is really brave. it is really vulnerable to share yourself and share yourself repeatedly and then put yourself on this crazy schedule that disrupts all your natural like rhythms and circadian rhythms, and then
Yep.
comes drinking, drugs, sex, all the addictions, and pretty soon you are like way off you're not on your North Star, you're off center and balance. And you still have this pain that is what's inspired it in the first place and made everyone love it, and then you keep moving through the machine and the machine doesn't want to stop, and next thing you know, people are overdosing or killing themselves.
What came to mind as you were sharing that, Kathryn, was like, when you're a new artist, say you just moved to LA from Kansas or wherever, right? And you don't know anybody, and it's like intimidating, and let's just say opportunities start to find you, you're really talented. But there's the initial pain of people don't understand me, like from the home state you're in, right? And then there's the initial pain of I'm in LA, I don't know anybody, I have no money, right? I don't know what's gonna happen, this is scary. But then you make it, and opportunities and money and everything finds you, and you're almost trading like one pain for another kind of pain. Does that make sense?
I mean, it's like anything in life. You can be a rock star or a rap star, or you could be like a kid who graduated from college and then you got a job as an assistant, and then you got like a marketing job, and then you're like a district marketing manager, and then whatever it is,
Yeah, that you're moving
there's
towards.
this level up.
Mm-hmm.
Life balance. We publicly see rock stars. You brought up Amy Winehouse, like drinking and being really, tapping down a lot through addiction. But there's just millions of people in the world who come home from their middle class job and start drinking and tune out and ignore their people around them and sit in pain.
Yeah, this doesn't just apply to artists and musicians. Yeah, that's true.
To me, we are energetic beings. We are molecular energetic beings living on a giant magnet. Okay. And if we know how to handle our psychological brain that we've been born with, which has an ego, and the ego wants to talk shit all the time and make us all feel crazy. And then we have a physical body that has all these biochemistry things happening. And then we have an energetic body, which is maybe not seen as much, but you can feel it. Like you can be having a great time. Somebody comes in with some energy and all of a sudden it changes things. It's a frequency kind of thing. But whenever someone's having a hard time, it's because something's way off.
But typically when you're saying something is way off, when you're saying something is, people are having a hard time because something is way off, I think the trickiest thing about that is it's like an airplane. You could be like 1 degree off or 2 degrees off, and it's not going to be problematic if it's for like 5 minutes. But if you are 1 or 2 degrees off for like a year or something, right? Then, do you know what I'm saying, Kathryn? Then it's like, whoa, how did it didn't even feel like that. You know what I'm trying to say
The mind starts to think too much. And then the mind thinks so much that then there's some depression, maybe some drinking starts, or maybe some eating starts, or maybe just reverting and staring at a screen. Then the physical body's not moving anymore. And so the physical body starts to feel fatigue and feel weak and maybe get sickness and maybe not, want to move as much. I've had experiences over the years of like, okay, I'll pay a lot of attention to my like psychological mind. I'll do therapy and write and do all this stuff. But then if you're not taking care of your physical body, and then that starts to go into a bad place. Like I've had a liver situation that's been interesting, that was very kind of scary for me. No matter who you are, there's no one in the world that is impervious to this notion of balance.
Nah, but the way you're saying it, there's so many areas to keep on top of, Kathryn, right? There's so many areas, and
a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. Let's just be honest. It's a lot of fucking work. Like it's really hard. I think I don't know, just maybe accepting that that's gonna feel like.
Here's the thing. There's this book that I really loved reading called 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Berkman. And it really reminds you, and I was reading Dandelion Wine by Ray Bradbury. They're describing like, it's a hot night, the kids are bored, and they're just laying on the porch, bored, listening to their elders talk and hearing all these stories. And the one story kicks off like an imagination kind of trip for
Mm-hmm.
this kid. And like just imagining and boredom is such a key to like an
Mm.
amazing creativity or ideas. And, I think technology robs us of boredom, so therefore people don't use boredom to come up with really revolutionary things. What you need for balance is very different if you're living somewhere in the middle of the forest and you don't have a job where you're on email and everyone's bugging you all day and there's expectation around you. And you will have a very different experience than someone who's like an ad exec in New York and who also has like two children and maybe they're a single mother. So those two life experiences are very different. And therefore, the stresses of those lives will require a different amount of balance. So for me to have balance and not get too caught up in pressure, imposter syndrome, there's a lot that can go with that. I have to put a lot more into it. I have a 2-hour self-care practice that is pretty firm.
First
It's
thing
a
in the
6 to
morning.
8
First,
a.m.
yep, yep. Mm-hmm.
Yes, like right away, get up, meditate. I do Shambhavi Mudra, an ancient yogic kriya. For years, I did TM. Today, I did TM. I'm about to start this Stoic challenge for 100 days, where I'm going to do 45 minutes Stoic meditation. I have no idea what that's going to be, but I'm like just excited to learn about it.
Yeah.
So whatever it is, I do some form of meditation, and then I have an infrared little sauna that I have out back, and that's where I go and I do light work cards, which are kind of like tarot cards, where I just speak to myself and ancestors, and I just really check in with myself.
This is a real practice that you're doing. Like, you don't just get to wake up and be Kathryn Frazier without all this stuff, right? Like, you're not this, right? You're
Right.
human at the end of the
And
day. So
here's the thing. When people tell me I don't have time to do that, I'm like, bullshit, you don't have time, because I'm a single mother that runs 2 companies and I finished a book and I'm going to start teaching at a university. Like, I don't want to hear that. You just are not managing your time well. Like, I don't waste a lot of time doing things that don't matter.
Yeah.
So I go to bed. I have a strict bedtime.
Okay, wait. Another thing we have to cover, Kathryn, is like dealing with haters. Very important, right? Is like how to deal with haters or naysayers, and it can happen at like early levels. Like Tyler, I don't know. I had Tyler, the creator's manager, on the show, and Tyler's different. Tyler got a lot of hate for being different. But even when you're, post success, like this is something I want to touch on, because even the Weeknd, who you've worked with for like a while now, right? So the Weeknd just caught a ton of bad press for the Idol, right? It's like, so it can happen early, later. What have you learned about dealing with that stuff?
If a tree falls in the forest, is there a sound? That old adage, that old thing, is to me the truth. That's why all those old adages are so great, because they're real. And people like Abel, like The Weeknd, J. Cole is another one over the years. I love, like, I remember Cole, he's so pure. He used to not do any press because he just didn't want to engage his ego, even if it was good press. He's been offered, like, the cover of like Rolling Stone and things like that, and he's just like, yeah, but then I'm gonna like pay attention to it, and then I'm gonna wonder, like, it's he's so pure. He just keeps it about art, and yeah, he does press here and there sometimes, but he's a good example of someone who's, like, I think very present and in tune with not thinking a lot about what other people think and just kind of staying with what matters.
That's interesting as a publicist, though. That's interesting as a publicist, though, right? Because like part of what you do is you bring opportunities to artists, right? You bring up, and so you're bringing opportunity to J. Cole, and
like, not paying attention to what everyone thinks is the key. Meaning, I have seen really, really famous artists. Actually, there's one that I was thinking of, and I don't rep, but I used to be around a lot. And that person seemed to me to be reading every comment on Instagram. And I remember saying to them, you have got to stop doing that. Like, don't look at all. Like, don't even look at all. Like, just do what you do and keep it moving, because you are a famous person and you're not a regular person, and it is different for you. Regular people don't have thousands of people talking about how they look or how shitty their song was or they got fat or whatever, these terrible things that people say. regular people might just have someone be a little icy and then they get all upset. It's a very different scenario. So real deal artists like Abel, The Weeknd, J. Cole, Tyler, but the people I've worked with, Skrillex, one thing I've noticed about them that they have in common is they have their eyes so on the prize and on the vision of what they care about that I don't think any of those people are really, they're not spending time listening to the noise.
Wow.
And if you really listen to the noise as an artist, I don't know how you would really make it. And it would impact your art because then you would start changing your art based on the noise around you. And that would be really messing with your creativity. So don't look, don't listen, turn the comments off, don't read the comments.
I guess the tricky thing is like when you're starting out, Kathryn, you need people to get behind your art a little bit, right? But that's just going to happen organically if you're right, if you're making good art.
I work with really young artists all the time, like brand new, like, a lot of my huge artists I've worked with since they were like a kid in their bedroom. And I tell them all the same thing, which is like, yes, you need social media because it's your marketing machine. It's how you get yourself out into the world.
Yeah.
And yes, you want to engage fans to some extent because it's how they have a connection to you and you build it up. But you have to have real boundaries and limits to how you engage and what you read and what you look at, and comparing yourself and your numbers to other people who put something out. Oh, they got 100,000 more views than I did when I put mine out. And I've heard people get down to the like, it's been out 12 hours. So-and-so's, when they were out 12 hours, they were at already 1 million. We're at, like that kind of stuff is crazy making.
Yeah.
Social media, I use it. Yeah. It helps me with business totally.
Right.
And I love looking at certain things. I tap into the humanity of the world on my social media because mine is like a happy channel. Yeah. Like if you go through my feed, it's nothing but happy. My old channel started to make me have a lot of anxiety.
Really?
And we have to protect ourselves. Yeah. So sometimes you got to protect yourself, put your oxygen mask on, put some boundaries around how you handle things. Yeah. Same thing, like I love pizza. I'll eat a piece of pizza. I don't need to eat 2 large pizzas. I'll feel like shit. It won't work out for me.
Right.
So, you apply that to literally everything.
I like that. Yeah, that's
especially social media.
It's important. I like it. Mike Tyson's trainer, Kathryn, said he had this really cool sort of parable about fear and how he's like, fear is a friend of extraordinary people, right? So he's like, because fear is like fire. Fire can keep you warm in the winter. It can cook your food. But if you let it get out of control, it can burn you up. So you've spent a lot of time around The Weeknd and just seeing somebody, I don't know, operate at a really high level for a long time. Like, what's one thing you've just observed, and how's he able to do that in a graceful way?
He's just really pure to himself. He surrounds himself with people that are really genuine and true and his real friends. They're the people he's been with before he was The Weeknd. And, really, like, I think has like a lot of like, just really tapped into his own truth and his own vision, trusts himself. Yep. Sometimes I get artists who come in, they want to be famous and they want to be all this stuff, but they don't trust themselves. And they need a lot from other people. Mm-hmm. And I always know right away, I'm like, they're not going to make it. Like, wow. I just, sometimes I've literally watched things that are really hyped up because I can tell it's going to become this like really hard thing, and then there's the Abels of the world and Skrillex is another one, that person I work with, J. Cole, where they're so clear on and tapped into their creativity. And they don't waste their time listening to a bunch of other voices because they trust themselves. I think that those kind of people, my guess is Tyler's probably that way. I don't know him, but I find that all the greats usually have that. Mm-hmm. And Kanye has it really strongly too. I worked with Kanye for a while, and things change when people have like mood disorders and different things that can affect addiction, all kinds of things can kind of change our general disposition. But like Kanye, you even watch it when you watch the documentary that was made on him. He was so tied into his own passion and what he believed to be true, and was like so excited to share it with the world. And he didn't give a shit what people thought. I love when sometimes artists will ask me, I have a young artist who's blowing up around me right now. and they'll ask me what I think of something, and I'll say what I think. Like, oh, I don't think it's that good, and I think that, or I won't say it's not good. I'll give real feedback, and they'll be like, okay, thanks. I'm not going to change anything though. I like it the way it is. And I'm like, okay, cool. Tuning out is so important. And I know we always talk about tuning out as bad because you're supposed to be present and aware. And yes, but you got to tune out the noise. There's so much noise. There's more noise now than there's ever been.
Yes.
It's crazy.
Yes. Yeah, completely. And I want to say,
like
so the next guest that's on the show, actually, who I already interviewed, is Reggie Watts. So you might know Reggie Watts, who's like a really talented musician, comedian.
Yeah.
He said, yeah, he was fun, man. He said he actually feeds off of the hate. He's like, I can't wait for the hate. Like he said in our interview. So some people have a different constitution. I'm like, okay.
If I were sitting with Reggie, I would say, I would be curious about that. I'd be like, what is it that makes you want to invite the hate? Like, what does that mean? Like, what does that do for you, or why? Or is it more a statement of like, it's going to come anyway, so I just embrace it?
I think he almost saw it as an opportunity to like be didactic and like I don't know, like there was one instance where somebody came at him and he just spoke really eloquently, like as an opportunity to like kind of correct them, like almost in a way to like better humanity. It was like coming from that place. Does that make sense? Like it was an opportunity to like better somebody or something, and so I was like, okay. Like he wanted.
I mean, if it's learning from anything, it's always good.
Yeah. I mean, he wanted to have a sit down with Elon Musk. Like that was what he said. He's like, I wish I could just sit down with Elon Musk and like, he's acting like a 5-year-old child, and I wish I could just have a conversation with him. Things like that,
Well, with you, Reggie. You and Elon. I wish we could sit.
We got to arrange that, Kathryn. Let's see what we can do. Obviously, we're just talking about like the negative aspects of ego, right? But it's interesting. Like there is a positive aspect too that's like very necessary in some ways, like because from a self-belief place, right? Like you have to believe in yourself to do anything in life, I feel like, right?
Well, the ego gets you out of bed. Literally, you wouldn't get out of bed and feed yourself if you didn't have an ego driving you to do that. So it's totally necessary for surviving.
The one thing I wanted to say too was when you were starting Biz 3, you had to be really resourceful. I believe I heard you share, Kathryn, like didn't you get like a friend to get you like the death row database or something? Is this ringing a bell?
Yeah, I just didn't have any money, and I think people have an easier time doing it now because they have things like Muckrack, or you can digitally take a database and transfer it to yourself, or I long ago gave up trying to protect our database. It's like digital everything. A friend of mine shared contacts with me they were working at Interscope Death Row. I'm not a proponent of stealing. But I didn't know who to hit up, and it didn't help me anyway because my first artist was Will Oldham, who's like this indie rock, more folk leaning artist. But you have to be resourceful. Like I didn't have any money, so I used a credit card that I got. It had to like 21%, interest rate.
Wow.
And I bought some big giant weird computer that I had to make payments on. And my friend gave me a closet in his bar, and so I sat like with the little table in the closet, and I'd put the chair at the opening of the closet. I waited tables for almost 10 years, 5-6 days a week, to make money, to live, and also to pay my first employee. I used my tips, my cash. I had cash tips. And, I just did whatever I had to do to make it happen.
The kind of mind-blowing thing is that at any given moment in life, we could meet somebody that could just like change the trajectory and course of our life. And I just think that's so interesting and fascinating and awesome to pick apart.
There was an 18-year-old kid that worked or interned at Biz 3 who was watching me. Actually, there's actually parallel stories here. There were two kids who were watching me go through a lot of one was watching me when I lost a pregnancy really late. The other one watched me as a new parent and the stresses of that and trying to build a business and and both of them spoke up. One said, "My mom is a well-known psychic. Do you want to see her?" And I was like, "I don't know. Psychics seem kind of bullshit to me back then." And but sure, you know. And the other kid was like, "I grew up, in Fairfield, Iowa, learning transcendental meditation. My parents worked for the Maharishi University there and the home of TM in America. And they both introduced me, one to a psychic and one to TM. And the psychic proceeded to tell me that, oh, I see you have two fathers, one that died and one that's alive. And I said, no, I have a stepdad and a real dad, and both are gone. And she said, no, your real dad's definitely still alive. And I was like, no, he died in a plane crash. Long story, this is a good one, but I will spare you. It'll be an hour podcast in itself. She was right. It turns out I'd been lied to and told that my father was dead when he wasn't. And it led me on a path that over the course of the next 20 years, I eventually found my father, a whole family, and through a genetic test, found out that the family I thought I had isn't actually my family. Andrew Runkle, Jordan Gazzardo, those are the two kids. And then they led me to these paths of transcendental meditation. And I was really fascinated by him telling me about meditating and watching all these kids that grew up around meditation and how evolved and like grounded they were. And it led to an interest by me in that. And then I ended up digging into meditation. I went to Vipassana. I went to learn transcendental meditation, did it for many years, still do it. I sort of tried different meditations for what I need at the time. And that just opened up my whole world. I lived in Chicago for many years, and I lived for many years in Humboldt Park, and it was a Latin King neighborhood. It was a gang neighborhood. And as he sort of started to get older and have this wisdom, while he was in prison, had learned Qigong. He learned Qigong and really tapped into energy and kind of this warrior like mindfulness. And he came out a different person. He had this knowledge and optimism, even while living in a really tense, and there was a lot of tension with police in the community. And he had this, and I've seen this with a lot of elders that I've seen on even south side of Chicago. I used to go to these healers, these women who are, really big healers and leaders in the Black community on the south side of Chicago that are very spiritual and open and curious and also very aware because, there's certain parts of Chicago that are like war zones. And
absolutely,
you can, they don't make you more vulnerable. They actually make you stronger.
I wanted to say one more thing on that level too. I heard someone share once, and this is so powerful that's never left me since I've heard it. Cynicism is just wounds disguised as wisdom.
Totally. I love. I mean, to me, cynicism is just security. It's just fear.
Amen. Amen. And but the problem is you could put that on somebody and keep them down, keep their possibilities limited. So I mean that's like one of the cornerstones of good coaching too, isn't it? Is like helping people kind of recognize and realize all of these possibilities are limitless, Kathryn. Like you try and tap people into that, I'm sure, as much as you can. Joseph Campbell, which I think you're a fan of, Joseph Campbell, like has this thing where he's like, nothing vitalizes people like coming into contact with another person who's living from a vital place. Does that make sense? Like just being around that energy like reminds you.
Energy begets energy. Energy begets energy.
Energy begets energy. Yes. You've been around, some of the biggest stars in music, right? For a long time now. And like, do you feel it? Like when they walk into a room, like, do you feel it?
I mean, I can feel if someone who's really tuned in to like and operating at a really high frequency comes into the room and you're like, damn. A lot of
Yeah,
times the energy
yeah.
someone famous walks in the room is simply because everyone else is so excited they're in the room, you feel their energy.
Mm,
So then their
right.
energy spreads. You know, I won't name names. Years ago, uh, I was in the room with a very, very, very famous person who I don't currently work with, but very famous. And everybody was really excited. And it was this kinetic energy that was so exciting. And everybody felt it. And it was a really up meeting. And then I think the label person was trying to flex and almost maybe their ego got activated and wanted to impress the artist and start getting a little bit like, well, what is this doing? And what's your department doing? And what's your thing doing? Instead of an
Mm.
inspirational tone, it started to turn into, I will not be satisfied unless, it got really, and it felt
Oh.
performative to me for the artist. And
Hmm.
then the artist
Yeah.
kind of little, and then it turned into more of like a challenge, like we better have this and this or what, and then the energy in the room just immediately just was like it was like somebody opened up the ceiling and poured cement all over everybody. And I was just like, wow, that was wild how like weird that got. And then the artist threw out a very bizarre idea, like not bizarre like in a creative way, but bizarre meaning like that just doesn't make any sense and probably can't happen. And and I love crazy ideas, so I'm not being, sheepish.
Yeah.
And everybody
Yeah.
in the room was like, "Yeah, totally, great, on it, do it, yeah, yeah." And then as soon as the leaders and the artists left, everyone was like, "What the fuck was that? How on earth are we going to do that?" And I was like, it was so interesting to watch. And I was in a position of being an observer because I was supposed to be observing whether I wanted to work with this person. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I was like, if you guys didn't think that idea made sense, why don't you tell them? And it was like, it's just energy. It's so good. It's so scary. It's so good. It's so, and it's hard for people to break out and say what they need to say when they're caught up in energy. So energy is
Yeah.
powerful.
How do you deal with receiving compliments? Like, was that hard for you at first? Have you gotten, maybe this is my intuition, because sometimes I'll get a compliment on a podcast or a clip or whatever, and it just, sometimes it feels weird. I don't know what the,
Well, I mean, if I were you, I would ask you like, well, what would make the energy come down? Is it like you don't believe them, or
maybe it is from like a, man, do I deserve, it could be from like a, do I really deserve this love that I'm getting right now? Maybe. Let's liken that to like a song. Like there's an artist who writes a song and the song is just, it obviously fulfills them, right? When they're crafting the song, and then somebody else gives them love for that song. It's a trippy feeling. No? Do you get what I'm saying?
I remember when I was younger, I was really tall. I was like 6 feet tall when I think I was in fifth or sixth grade. And I
Mm-hmm.
always got a lot of attention for being tall. And I hated it. And when people would, it was like, are you a model? Do you play basketball? Do you play volleyball? It was like, that's all you ever get asked. Um,
Yeah.
and I always wanted to shrink and like, and so when
Yes.
people would
Yeah.
compliment
Yeah.
me, I would always get really like, ugh, thanks. So anyway, where we, like deflect. Then, it's like stages of life. Then I think somewhere in my 20s, I actually wanted a lot of validation because I had imposter syndrome because I was starting a company and everyone else was so far ahead of me and I was nobody. And so then I think was seeking attention, you know. Um,
Mm.
and, yeah, as you keep leveling up and growing, and, I'm in my 50s now. So now it's like when people compliment me, I immediately, the automatic switch is just always gratitude, but gratitude that they're feeling good, meaning like, oh, I love the talk you gave on something or whatever. And it's like, oh man, I'm so glad that you resonated with that. Like, I'm so thankful that you got something out of it. Either way, you're engaging the ego. You're either, the ego's got you
Mm.
on whichever end that is, you know? And it's like, so here,
Mm.
I have this sitting next to my desk. Sometimes during Zooms, I lift weights because I'm trying to multitask. So
Yeah. Yeah.
this
Yeah.
is a dumbbell. Um, and it's like, here's the compliment and here's the
Mm,
diss, you know,
mm.
and you don't want to read a comment and then fall off the edge. And you don't want to be like obsessed with feeling yourself, because then it leads to a lot of
Praise.
fantasy,
Yeah.
a lot of,
Hmm.
and you start to be, you just want to be this part in the middle. This was the equanimous, the, you know, and because we're humans and we have brains, we can't help it. When we die and go back to being an energy, we'll just be this. I had it happen last week. I had a week where I was really in my ego, you know,
Mm,
um, and
mm.
I was talking mean to myself, and
Wait. You were talking mean to yourself. I just want to make sure I got that word. You were talking mean.
negative self-talk.
Negative. You were tuned
So,
into what they
you know,
call "K fucked radio." Right. Yeah.
yeah, I'm going through a transition in my life. So I'm single for the first time in a long time, and
Mhm.
feeling really good. And then another part of me is like, oh, you're old. No one's gonna like you.
Mm.
You're not hot anymore. You're not this anymore. Your body doesn't look like this. Nobody wants to be. My brain went bip bip bip. And then I was like, yeah, it doesn't matter. I'm never going to talk to anyone else again. Like I went through this whole crazy talk for like a couple days, and I was like, wow, your ego is really kicking up right now. The ego is up there, you know. And I did my writing and my meditating, and I calmed it right back down. And sure enough, as always happens, I got affirmation from the universe. I.e., some attractive people showed interest in me, whether I want to,
Wow.
you know, that or not. It was the universe showing me like, shut up, you're good. And so I was like, thank you so much for the sign. Right now I'm not ready, but thank you. And we have those things happen.
I thought of like MGMT, the band MGMT, who had that album with there was like the three monster hits that were global. Time to
Sure.
Pretend, I think, Electric Feel, these, and I'm like, but there was like seven other songs on that album that nobody really knows, and you know what I mean? Like they were kind of like skip through tracks, I guess. So my point is like, whatever you're creating, whatever you're doing, like nobody bats 1,000. I don't know if you're familiar, like Doja Cat, obviously, and she's been in the press a lot lately. I've kind of noticed and paid attention
Yeah.
to some of that, and man, there's this like like there's like fans or whoever it is or not fans and saying stuff, and she's kind of like holding a pretty firm line, like it's like go live your life, like or whatever she might say it in like a little harsher way, but essentially like go live your life, I'm doing me. You know what I'm saying, Kathryn? It's like that's interesting.
Arguments are always just egos against egos. You know, whether someone's right or wrong, it's still an ego and an ego. And if someone says something, especially when you have so many fans, to me it's like just ignore it. Like I always tell artists, don't engage when a fan says something weird. It's like, why? Because you'll engage one person and then people will think you're engaging all of them.
Yeah, that's really well said. I saw a clip. This was powerful. Somebody was being interviewed and said, if I did something to upset you, text me about it. If you don't have my number to text me, then I don't know you well enough to have done anything wrong to you. I'm like that's really good. You know,
Yeah.
having a family member in music, do you kind of let them find their own way? Do you advise?
I have a family where not only was my ex-husband, but also like I've always been with creators and my children.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
I have two children and both are creators. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I have learned enough in the music industry to know to stay out of the way a lot on that. Especially new creatives, you got to just let people go do their thing and tap into like their vision and their whole thing. And again, if it's good energetically, it'll get picked up. A lot of people say you have to know people in the music industry to get discovered. There's definitely some truth to that for sure, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also like these days, I mean, every artist I've ever worked with had zero connection to the music industry. And especially when social media came,
Yeah.
there's a whole world and marketing world. So I always tell kids, man, you can be anywhere in the world and you absolutely should think that you can make it in music.
How are they able to do that? Just from being in
because
obscurity
because
to,
usually it has to do with because they're good. People who want to find art are combing. They're combing for, like, P and Coach at Quality Control. They look through so many SoundClouds and so many, like, links, and like, people really look for talent.
then the last takeaway is like that self-doubt, um, when you're kind of on your come up, which again, it's hard. If you had to say, yo, here's like the skeleton key as best you could for dealing with self-doubt, I want to put that out there to the listeners, because I think there's a lot of creatives on the way up.
Self-doubt is when your brain's rolling around in itself, and if you can not if you're having a hard time focusing, you know getting present. Even I do ho'oponopono, or you can be like, there's a hair on my ledge, the back of my neck is hot, I can hear a dog barking, a lady's walking by with a green sweater. Like, you get yourself out of your head. It's like kittens in a basket. I'm going to, you put it back in. Going to wander back in. You start to retrain your brain. Vic Mensa, rapper Vic Mensa, who I love and is one of the smartest people I know, he turned me on to this book, The Game of Life and How to Play It, written by a woman in 1929. And it's one of the best books about manifesting that I've read. Like, that's very tactical. There's probably millions of artists out there that wanted to be artists and that could even be someone that we know, but their negative self-talk stopped it, and then they got a job or they did something else. So it's like, the more you can learn to use tools to clear the brain and get present, it's probably easier to tap into that vision.
That's a fantastic skeleton key, is the presence. Yeah. I mean, did you have times where you thought Biz 3 wasn't gonna like make it? Because it's
Oh my
hard
God.
on the way up. Like, did you ever have a
I literally, sometimes I'm like, oh, what if everyone's, pulls out? And, well, I used to clean houses. I could start a cleaning company. Like, I'm like almost 30 years in, and I still think that sometimes.
So then the answer is certainly on the way up, you had a lot of those moments then before you were kind of more established with Biz 3, right?
You don't have any fear come up. Like, maybe you're a robot. I don't know. Like, of course, it's just, what do you do with that fear? Do you see the fear and go like, yep, I'm really fucking scared, but okay. Or, oh my God, I'm so scared. Okay, forget it. That's the difference between the people that end up making it in music and art. That's the difference between, how hard it is to make a film? It's so much harder to make a film than it is to make an album.
Absolutely.
And I coach a bunch of people in film, and people are like, yeah, well, I need this and this and this and this, and I'm like, no, you need to just go take a camera and make something. Start somewhere.
Okay. All right, everybody. I hope you got a lot out of this episode. I certainly did. Kathryn, thank you for blessing us. People
Thank you
can
so
follow you
much,
on
and, like,
social.
really good questions.
Thank you so much. I'm glad you enjoyed yourself. I'm sure people will get a lot out of this. And go follow Kathryn on social to go get some happiness. Is it?
Put me
Can
on
you
your
say your
happy
socials?
pillow. Oh, my
What's,
Instagram is KLFBiz3.
there you go.
KLF,
Okay,
my,
everybody.
and then
And then Biz3 on
thank you
Instagram.
for
Go
having
follow
me.
her right now. Thank you, Kathryn.
Bye.
Okay. Bye. See you guys next episode.